not a survey of the history of the Baha'i Faith. We picked out certain particular aspects which may be of relevance as we think about how to prepare for those conversations, how to begin practicing those conversations that we should be having around the bicentennial of the birth of the Blessed Beauty. The story of the Baha'u'llah's proclamation is really quite extraordinary in terms of history, but also even within the Baha'i context. And I must confess, when I started researching and preparing this, that I had a good deal of difficulty getting my head around the phenomenon, simply because Baha'u'llah wrote so many documents, and their contents is so creative in the way he's organized this material. And as I was doing it, just to help myself understand it, I prepared a sort of a table chronologically with the different writings and who they were addressed to and something about the content. And I decided that although this is a very preliminary sort of a work in progress, that it was worth sharing. So there's a stack of them over there on a music stand which you can take on your way out. Please don't go and get them now and read them while we're talking, but they are offered as a humble contribution and kind of a byproduct of my own efforts to prepare this talk. Now, the idea of writing to kings and rulers, of course, was not entirely novel. Muhammad sent emissaries to announce his mission. He didn't write letters because he didn't write, but he sent messengers to the Shah of Persia, who was Khosrow II at that time, the ruler of Ethiopia, the emperor of Byzantium, the ruler of Egypt, and the governor of Damascus, and the imam of Yamama. So this notion of addressing rulers is at least, that goes back at least to Muhammad. And it's interesting that the Shah of Persia was already addressed at that period. The Bab also addressed the kings collectively in the Qayyamul Asma and sent specific tablets to Muhammad Shah of Persia and Sultan Abdul Majid of Turkey. So here we have already the Shah of Persia and the Sultan of Turkey, and Baha'u'llah will be speaking to them, writing to them again, as you know. Baha'u'llah said that, however, based on this precedent, and you will see that his addresses to these rulers went far further and much deeper. And he himself said, "Never since the beginning of the world hath the message been so openly proclaimed." In fact, this was one of Baha'u'llah's primary focuses of attention or priorities for a period of 10 years. The first message to the ruler was in 1863, while he was in Istanbul, and he wrote to the Sultan of Turkey at that time. Unfortunately, to the best of my knowledge, that the text of that message has not been found, but it is at least established because Baha'u'llah himself mentioned it in other writings that he wrote. And this was, part of it was a protest against the edict of further banishment to Edirne, Adrianople, and part of it was an indictment of the Sultan's rule. Now, in these, and this process then went on from Edirne, Adrianople. He wrote the Surah Muluk and the first tablet to Napoleon. On the way from, and also his long letter to Nasruddin Shah, Lahi Sultan, was also in 1868 from Edirne. Then on the way from Edirne to Gallipoli, he wrote the Suri Rais, which is a message to the Grand Vizier of the Ottoman Empire. And he wrote to him again upon arrival in Akka. There's another message to the foreign minister of the Turkish Empire, Lahi Fuad, from the Akka citadel. Then we have the second tablet to Napoleon, the tablet to the Pope, the tablet to Tsar Alexander II, and the tablet to Queen Victoria, all of which were written from the Akka citadel around 1869. Then, very interestingly, Baha'u'llah chose to prepare a new edition, if you will, of the Suri Heikhal, which he'd written in Edirne in 1868, but including in the text the messages to the Pope, to Napoleon III, to Tsar Alexander, Queen Victoria, and Nasruddin Shah. And then he added sort of a concluding paragraph to that, and had this prepared and distributed. He had it written actually in the form of a pentacle, and clearly it was for general distribution at that time as a complete work. And then, of course, as most of you know, in the Kitab-i-Aqdas, revealed in 1873 in the house of Udi Khamar, he addressed the kings of the earth, the rulers of America, and the presidents of the republics therein, Kaiser William I of Germany, and Franz Joseph, Emperor of Austria and Hungary, and the leaders of religion. Now, even then, it doesn't stop, because many of the tablets revealed after the Aqdas also include messages or appeals to the world leaders. But I think still the main phenomena really is bookended in this 10-year period from 1863 to 1873. But just from the recitation of the number of these, and I don't know how many, we were talking about word counts, I don't know what this represents, and of course these writings also include appeals to the believers. They include such things as the prayers of fasting, and some things about the Baha'i calendars, and the calendar, and the twin birthdays, and so on. Baha'u'llah's style involved moving from different things and combining different themes together. But the dominant themes of these works were the appeal, or the messages, the proclamation to the kings, the secular rulers, and the religious potentates, but also to the followers of all religions, to the parliamentarians of the world, and so on. And it's an extraordinary piece of work. Obviously, I can't summarize all of the contents of these works, but I think that we chose as the title "Speaking Truth to Power" because that's a concept that our societies are interested in. And certainly some of the part of the text here can certainly be characterized as a very bold address from a prisoner who was completely within the control of and subject to the rule of some of these potentates, but who fearlessly challenged them and brought them to account. Now, to the Pope, who at that point was still a secular ruler as well as a religious ruler at the head of the Papal States. It didn't last very long after he received the message, but when Baha'u'llah wrote to him, he was a very powerful king as well as the head of an enormous ecclesiastical organization. And Baha'u'llah said, "O Supreme Pontiff, incline thine ear to that which the fashioner of mouldering bones counselleth thee, as voiced by him who is his most great name. Sell all the embellished ornaments thou dost possess, and expend them in the path of God, who causeth the night to return upon the day, and the day to return upon the night. Abandon thy kingdom to the kings, and emerge from thy habitation with thy face set toward the kingdom with a capital K, and detached from the world. Then speak forth the praises of thy Lord between heaven and earth. Now, I don't see anybody writing to the current Pope and suggesting that he might sell all the ornaments. And the current Pope is a much more benign character than Pope Pius IX. So this is an example. Another one is, and you're fairly familiar with this, but returning to the writing to the kings collectively in the tablet to Queen Victoria, actually. O kings of the earth, we see you increasing every year your expenditures and laying the burden thereof on your subjects. This verily is wholly and grossly unjust. Fear the sighs and tears of this wronged one, and lay not excessive burdens on your peoples. Do not rob them to rear palaces for yourselves. Nay, rather, choose for them that which ye choose for yourselves. Now, we talk about the extremes of wealth and poverty today. We talk about the distribution of income and about corruption in high places. Baha'u'llah, I think, is unsparing in his statements on that regard. He also, in the Surah Muluk, says to the rulers, know ye that the poor are the trust of God in your midst. Watch that ye betray not his trust, that ye deal not unjustly with them, and that ye walk not in the ways of the treacherous. So again, not mincing his words. In another place, in the same tablet, he says, if ye stay not the hand of the oppressor, if ye fail to safeguard the rights of the downtrodden, what right have ye then to vaunt yourselves among men? What is it of which ye can rightly boast? Is it on your food and your drink that ye pride yourselves? On the riches ye lay up in your treasuries? On the diversity and the cost of the ornaments with which ye deck yourselves? This is a very challenging message. In another place in that same tablet, if ye pay no heed unto the counsels which in peerless and unequivocal language we've revealed in this tablet, divine chastisement shall assail you from every direction, and the sentence of his justice shall be pronounced against you. On that day ye shall have no power to resist him, and shall recognize your own impotence. I'm just choosing a few gems here. This is also from the same message, and he's addressing this part to the kings of Christendom. And he starts by saying, have ye not heard the saying of Jesus, the Spirit of God, I go away and come again unto you? And then, why did you fail to recognize him? And yet, behold how, when he did bring the truth, ye refused to turn your faces toward him, and persisted in disporting yourselves with your pastimes and fancies. Ye have, by reason of your failure, hindered the breath of God from being wafted over you, and have withheld from your souls the sweetness of its fragrance. Ye continue roving with delight in the valley of your corrupt desires. By God, ye and all that ye possess shall pass away. So, in terms of speaking truth to power, we have an extraordinary example, and one which is still relevant, although, as I'll mention shortly, it's many of the kings and rulers to whom he wrote, and many of their dynasties have since disappeared, but we now have similar issues, I think, in many countries with the elected leadership. At the same time, Baha'u'llah is proclaiming in the same messages, very clear terms, the essence of his mission, the positive side of his teachings, and making it very clear what actually what was expected. So it's in the tablet to Queen Victoria that we find this extraordinary series of statements about the world and what it needs. I won't read them because you're familiar with it, but he starts with regard the world as a human body, which, though it is creation whole and perfect, hath been afflicted through various causes with grave disorders and maladies. Not for one day did it gain ease, nay, its sickness waxed more severe, as it fell under the treatment of ignorant physicians. Then he said, we behold it in this day at the mercy of rulers so drunk with pride that they cannot discern clearly their own best advantage, much less recognize a revelation so bewildering and challenging as this. That which the Lord hath ordained as the sovereign remedy and mightiest instrument for the healing of all the world is the union of all its peoples in one universal cause, one common faith. And it goes on to say, now that you've refused the most great peace, hold ye fast to this, the lesser peace, that haply you may in some degree better your own conditions and that of your dependents. And he's also in here talking about the need for disarmament, or at least stopping arms races. He talks about Be united, O kings of the earth, for thereby will the tempest of discord be stilled among you, and your peoples find rest. Should any one among you take up arms against another, rise ye all against him. So the principle of collective security. All of these things are laid out in these tablets. Now, have also the appeals to not only to religious leaders but to followers of religions. O ye peoples of all faiths, walk not in the ways of them that followed the Pharisees and thus veiled themselves from the Spirit, meaning Jesus. They truly have strayed and are in error. The ancient beauty is come in his most great name, and he wisheth to admit all mankind to the most holy kingdom. And again, O followers of the Son, these are from the tablet to the Pope. We have once again sent John unto you, and he verily hath cried out in the wilderness of the Bayan. So he's referring to the way in which the Bab is the return of St. John the Baptist. O peoples of the world, cleanse your eyes. The day whereon you can behold the promised one and attain unto him hath drawn nigh. And then say, O concourse of Christians, we have on a previous occasion revealed ourselves to you, and ye recognized me not. Yet this is yet another occasion vouchsafed unto you. This is the day of God. Turn ye unto him. Now, I don't need to go into detail, but there were some remarkable things that happened immediately or within a very short period after the revelation of these writings and tablets. It's in the Akdas that Baha'u'llah refers to the banks of the Rhine, foreshadowing the defeat of Germany in 2 successive wars. But some things even more rapidly. Napoleon, within about a year after receiving the second tablet, was defeated in the Battle of Sedan. His empire fell apart. He was sent into exile. The Turkish ruler, Baha'u'llah wrote in 1869, talking about the imminent downfall of Ali Pasha and the overthrow of the Sultan. Ali Pasha was dismissed and died in disgrace. Only 2 years later, the Sultan was overthrown 5 years after that. So in quite rapid succession, some of these very same rulers fell, lost their thrones, and in many cases their lives. I won't go into all the detail. The table that you can see there, you can follow some of these events. So, but in summing up this period, and this message, these messages and their consequences, Baha'u'llah wrote some very interesting things. Among others, he wrote that from two ranks of men power hath been seized, kings and ecclesiastics. He wrote, and it's in Gleanings, that in a passage in Gleanings in which it is God addressing Baha'u'llah, he says, "Warn and acquaint the people, O servant, with the things we have sent down unto thee. Let the fear of no one dismay thee, and be thou not of them that waver." And then a little further on, he says, "We have pledged ourselves to secure thy triumph upon earth, and to exalt our cause above all men, though no king be found who would turn his face toward thee." In another place, Baha'u'llah writes, "The kings have recognized that it was not in their interest to acknowledge me, and have likewise, and as have likewise the ministers and the divines, notwithstanding that my purpose hath been most explicitly revealed in the divine books and tablets, and the true one hath loudly proclaimed that this most great revelation hath appeared for the betterment of the world and the exaltation of the nations." And in fact, even within the tablet to Queen Victoria, there's a very interesting transition where, towards the end of the tablet, Baha'u'llah is well, I think again it's the voice of God speaking to Baha'u'llah, but he says, "Rein in thy pen, O pen of the Ancient of Days, and leave them to themselves, for they are immersed in their idle fancies." He's referring to the kings. Then he says, "Make thou mention of the Queen, that she may turn with a pure heart unto the scene of transcendent glory, may withhold not her eyes from gazing toward her Lord, the Supreme Ordainer, and may become acquainted with that which hath been revealed in the books and tablets by the Creator of all mankind. He through whom the sun hath been darkened and the moon eclipsed, through whom this call hath been raised betwixt earth and heaven." Now this is, of course, as you know, the letter in which Baha'u'llah commends the Queen Victoria for forbidding the slave trade, or stopping the slave trade, not slavery, but the slave trade at least, and also for giving power to the parliament. But clearly, in the message, he also expected more of her, and quite unusually, he concludes the tablet by revealing a prayer for her to say. Now, this may become of relevance in your country as we approach the bicentennial, but in this prayer, he recommends to Queen Victoria to pray in these terms: "O my sovereign Lord, I am but a vassal of thine, and thou art in truth the King of kings. I have lifted my suppliant hands under the heaven of thy grace and thy bounties. Send down then upon me from the clouds of thy generosity that which will rid me of all else save thee, and draw me nigh unto thyself. I doubt very much that Queen Victoria used this prayer, but it's an interesting indication of what actually was expected of the kings and rulers, and in the sense that she was perhaps one of the few where he found something where he could commend and encourage, the fact that he went on further to offer her this personal spiritual guidance is an indication that with all of the majesty and the power and the prophecies and the warnings, that the message was also one of love, even to these rather rascally tyrants who were ruling the world at that time. So we're going to continue giving you different voices and different aspects of the subject.